Today, we're going to dive into the darker side of reality with 7 horror stories involving encounters with real serial killers. So sit back, take a deep breath, and let's begin this terrifying journey through the most terrifying encounters ever documented. Oh, and before any psychopaths show up, take the opportunity to subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and leave a like. This helps the channel a lot and ensures that you don't miss any scary content like this. Let's go! Tune. The Silent. Neighbor Emma and Daniel Thompson were overjoyed when they purchased their first home in a quiet suburb of Mississauga. The young couple, both 29, had been saving for 3 years to make their dream of owning a home a reality. The 2-story property with its manicured garden seemed perfect for starting a family. "Ideal neighborhood," said Emma, a nurse at Toronto General Hospital, as they unpacked boxes. "Quiet, safe, perfect for kids." Daniel, an accountant at a local firm, agreed as he was tidying up his office. That's when he noticed it for the first time. His next-door neighbor was watching them from his second-floor window. "That gentleman is watching us again," Daniel murmured to Emma during dinner. Harold Winters, 73, had lived alone next door for more than 20 years. He was a widower, retired, and always polite in their rare chance encounters. But there was something disturbing about the way he watched them, steadily, silently, as if studying their every move. "Maybe it's just curiosity," Emma suggested. "Old people get lonely sometimes." But their observation became obsessive. Harold would appear at the window whenever they left or arrived. While they were working in the garden, they would feel his eyes fixed on them. At night, they would notice his silhouette peering through the curtains. "This is getting weird," Daniel said after 2 weeks. "Yesterday, he was taking pictures of our house." Emma decided to be friendly. He prepared cookies and went to introduce himself properly. Harold greeted her politely, but Emma noticed something disturbing. Through the half-open door, she saw photos of young couples covering an entire wall. "Family?" she asked. "Old projects," Harold replied vaguely, closing the door further. That night, Emma researched Harold online. She found property records showing that he had lived at 5 different addresses over the past 30 years, each time moving every 2 or 3 years. "Why does anyone move so much?" Daniel asked. The answer came when Emma dug deeper into her research. In every town where Harold had lived, young couples had mysteriously disappeared. The cases were never solved, always filed away as voluntary disappearances. "My God," Emma whispered, showing the articles to Daniel. "Look at the dates. He always moved right after the disappearances." Daniel checked the criminal records. Harold Winters had no prior record, but that only made it more sinister. A smart serial killer leaves no trace. They decided to keep a low-key eye on Harold. They installed security cameras aimed at their property. What they discovered confirmed their worst fears. Harold was constantly photographing them, recording their schedules, mapping out their routines. "He's studying us," Emma realized, analyzing the recordings. During Harold's absence, Daniel managed to peek into his yard. He found areas of recently turned earth and gardening tools that seemed unfit for normal maintenance. "We need to call the police," Emma said, but when they contacted authorities, they discovered the frustration of not having concrete evidence. "Observing neighbors is not a crime," the officer explained. "We need something more substantial." That's when they found the diary. During a storm, Harold left a window open. Papers flew into the Thompsons' backyard. Among them were pages from a notebook with detailed notes about their routines. Emma leaves 7:15, returns 6:30. Daniel works late on Tuesdays. Best time, Thursday night. Most disturbing, sketches of his home, including entry points and escape routes. "He's planning something," Daniel said, photographing the pages before discreetly handing them back. That Thursday, they decided to pretend to go out, but remain hidden. At 10 p.m., they saw Harold leaving the house carrying a large bag and tools. He headed for the back door of their house. Daniel called the police while Emma filmed. Harold used professional tools to pick the lock, moving with an efficiency that suggested experience. When police arrived, they found Harold inside the house, carrying ropes, sedatives, and tools that were clearly not for gardening. A search of Harold's home revealed shocking evidence: photographs of dozens of young couples, newspaper clippings about disappearances, and a basement converted into a torture chamber with sophisticated equipment. He had been operating for 30 years, explained Detective Inspector Williams. He would pick young couples in suburban areas, study them for months, then strike when he felt safe. Harold confessed to killing 23 couples over 3 decades. He used false identities, moved frequently, always choosing victims who fit his specific profile. "You were supposed to be my last job," he said during questioning. "After that, permanent retirement." The investigation revealed that Harold had meticulously planned the attack on the Thompsons. He knew that Emma worked regular shifts, that Daniel traveled occasionally, and that they had no children or pets who could complicate the kidnapping. For Emma and Daniel Thompson, the experience fundamentally changed their sense of security. They sold their house and moved into a gated community with 24-hour security. The silent neighbor case has shocked Canada, revealing how predators can hide in seemingly safe communities for decades. And for suburban residents, be warned, not every quiet neighbor is just shy, and constant observation can be a sign of something much more sinister than casual curiosity. Some predators spend months studying their future victims, waiting for the perfect moment to transform a quiet neighborhood into a horror scene. The unsolved case retired detective Robert McLeod was sorting through his personnel files when he got the call that would change everything. The 67-year-old had retired from Strathclyde Police 3 years earlier, but the Merchant City murders case still haunted him. 5 women killed between 1998 and 2003. The killer never caught. "Detective McLeod," said the calm voice on the phone. "I have information about the Sarah Mitchell case. Sarah Mitchell had been the first victim, found dead in 1998. McLeod had led the investigation for 5 years without success." "Who's speaking?" asked McLeod. "Someone who knows the truth. Can we meet? I have evidence you've never seen." The man identified himself as Thomas Gray, claiming to be a former employee of a forensic laboratory who had discovered suppressed evidence. They arranged to meet at a cafe in central Glasgow. Thomas appeared to be about 45, well-dressed and articulate. He carried a briefcase with photographs and documents that appeared to be authentic. "I worked at the lab during the 2000s, he explained. "My supervisor suppressed evidence for political reasons. Now that he's gone, I can speak out." The evidence was compelling. DNA analysis McLeod had never seen, photographs of the crime scene from different angles, detailed forensic reports. "Why are you looking for me now?" McLeod asked. "Because you were the only one who really cared about those women," Thomas replied. "You deserve to know the truth." In subsequent meetings, Thomas revealed more details. He knew intimate aspects of the crimes that had never been publicly disclosed. He described the victims with disturbing accuracy, including details that only the killer would know. "How do you know so much about the crimes?" McLeod asked during the 3rd meeting. "Extensive documentation," Thomas replied. "My supervisor was obsessive about details," but McLeod began to suspect. Thomas knew details that even the police files did not contain. Most disturbing, he seemed to know things about McLeod's personal life that were not in the public record. "You lived on Kelvin Street during the investigation," Thomas commented casually. "Your wife Margaret always worried when you were late." Margaret had died of cancer 2 years earlier. How did Thomas know about her concerns? McLeod decided to investigate discreetly. There was no record of Thomas Gray working in a local forensic lab. More alarming, the evidence Thomas had presented contained technical inconsistencies that a true forensic technician would not make. "Who are you really?" McLeod confronted at the 4th meeting. Thomas smiled coldly. "I thought you'd never ask, Detective. I'm someone you know very well, even though we've never officially met." The direction hit McLeod like a punch. He was face to face with the killer he had been chasing for 5 years. "You are him," McLeod whispered. "I always have been," Thomas confirmed. "And you were my most worthy opponent, so you deserve to know how it really happened." Thomas, whose real name was David Crawford, explained that he had been observing McLeod throughout the investigation. He knew their routines, their home, their family. "I've been down your street dozens of times," he said. "I've seen you leaving for work, coming back frustrated. I've seen Margaret waiting at the window." Crawford revealed that he had planned this meeting for years, waiting for McLeod to retire so he could approach without legal risk. "Why?" asked McLeod. "Because you were the only one who came close to capturing me," Crawford replied. "You deserve to know that your suspicions were correct." Crawford confessed to the 5 murders in graphic detail, explaining how he had avoided capture and why he had stopped in 2003. "I changed cities, new identity. But I always followed your career, Detective. You never gave up." McLeod realized he was in danger. Crawford hadn't revealed himself out of nostalgia. He had an ultimate plan. "What do you want from me?" he asked. "One last game," Crawford replied. "You against me, no police rules this time." Crawford revealed that he had studied McLeod obsessively, learning his vulnerabilities, current routines, even where he kept his retirement gun. "You have a choice," Crawford said. "You can try to arrest me, but you have no admissible evidence. Or you can accept my final challenge." McLeod pretended to consider the proposal while discreetly activating a tape recorder he always carried, a habit from his days as a working detective. "What would that challenge be?" he asked. Crawford explained his plan, a final showdown in a secluded location where only one would emerge alive. Just like the old days, but without backup this time. "What if I refuse? Then I'll start again. There are a lot of young women in Glasgow." McLeod agreed to meet Crawford at an abandoned factory, but secretly contacted his former partner, still active in the police force. The final confrontation revealed that Crawford had underestimated McLeod. The retired detective still had sharp instincts and, with backup arriving, managed to detain Crawford until the arrest. The recorded confession provided sufficient evidence for a conviction. Crawford was sentenced to life in prison for 5 murders. For Robert McLeod, the case was finally closed, but the experience left him disturbed by the realization of how long he had been watched without knowing it. The informant case has become a study in police academies on how serial killers can develop obsessions with their stalkers. And for retired investigators, be warned. Not every late-blooming informant has good intentions, and some unsolved cases can return in unexpected ways when the real culprit decides it's time for the final showdown. The teacher, Anna Hoffman, was in her 3rd year of psychology at the University of Vienna when she enrolled in the course Psychology of Trauma with Professor Dr. Klaus Richter. The charismatic 42-year-old professor was known for his engaging lectures and practical approach to the study of psychological trauma. Today, we're going to explore deep fears, Dr. Richter announced during a class. "I want each of you to share your greatest fear. There's no judgment here, just scientific learning." Anna, a dedicated 22-year-old student, initially admired the professor's methodology. He asked specific questions about traumatic experiences, social isolation, family relationships. He seemed genuinely interested in understanding each student's psyche, but gradually, Anna noticed disturbing patterns. Dr. Richter often took detailed notes when young students shared specific traumas. He asked about their daily routines, where they lived, whether they had close family support. "Professor Richter always asks very personal questions," commented Sarah, a German colleague, after a particularly intense class. "Yesterday he wanted to know if I live alone and what my work hours are. Anna began to observe more closely. During therapeutic exercises, Dr. Richter would isolate specific students for one-on-one sessions, always choosing vulnerable young people who had disclosed trauma or social isolation. It's to deepen the study, he explained when asked, but Anna noticed that these students often missed subsequent classes. When she asked about them, Dr. Richter claimed that they had transferred majors or dropped out of school for personal reasons. Strange how so many students give up after one-on-one sessions, Anna muttered to her friend Lisa Chen, an exchange student from Taiwan. Lisa nodded. And have you noticed how he always asks about our most specific fears? Yesterday, he wanted to know if I'm afraid of closed spaces. Anna decided to investigate discreetly. Accessing academic records, she discovered that 7 students had dropped out of the course in the past 2 years, all after attending one-on-one sessions with Dr. Richter. This isn't normal, Anna realized, checking the dropout statistics in other subjects. During a one-on-one session that Dr. Richter had suggested for her, Anna remained alert. He asked invasive questions about her personal life, routines, relationships. Do you live alone, Anna? He asked, taking detailed notes. With roommates, Anna lied, though she actually lived alone. What about your parents? Do they keep in touch? Often? Daily, he lied again, knowing his parents were traveling around Europe and rarely called. Dr. Richter seemed disappointed with her answers. Anna realized he was assessing her vulnerability, not her academic progress. That night, Anna researched Dr. Richter online. She discovered that he had worked at 3 different universities in the past 10 years, each time changing positions every 2 or 3 years. Most alarmingly, at each university, young students had disappeared while on duty. My God, Anna whispered. Finding articles about disappearances in Munich, Berlin, and Zurich, all cities where Dr. Richter had taught. Anna discreetly reached out to former students through social media. She found that several had had similar experiences. Invasive one-on-one sessions, questions about vulnerabilities, then pressure to continue therapy outside of the university. He invited me to his house for an advanced session, a former student from Berlin revealed. When I declined, he became very insistent. I changed my major soon after. Anna realized that Dr. Richter used his position to identify potential victims, studying their psychological vulnerabilities before attacking. During the next class, Dr. Richter announced a special exercise for the weekend, individual sessions, at his home to deepen the therapeutic work. Anna, he said after class, I'd like you to participate. You show exceptional potential. Anna feigned interest while secretly planning to expose Doctor. He agreed to the session, but contacted the police. First, I need concrete evidence, Detective Inspector Weber explained. Suspicions are not enough to arrest a respected university professor. Anna decided to use a hidden tape recorder during the session at Dr. Richter's house. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears. The residence was equipped with hidden cameras, containment equipment in the basement, and detailed files on dozens of female students, including secretly taken photographs. You are very perceptive, Anna, Dr. Richter said when he realized she had discovered his files. More than the others, Doctor. Richter confessed that he used his classes to study potential victims, identifying vulnerable young people through legitimate psychological techniques. Psychology is the perfect tool, he explained. I teach students to reveal their deepest fears, then use that information against them. While Dr. Richter prepared sedatives, Anna discreetly activated a panic alarm she had hidden in her purse. The police, who had been monitoring, raided the residence. The investigation revealed that Dr. Klaus Richter had killed 11 students over the course of 10 years, always using psychological methods to identify and isolate victims. He was a sophisticated predator, the investigator explained. He used legitimate psychological knowledge for criminal purposes. For Anna Hoffman, the experience changed her perspective on psychology and education. Today, she works with victims of abuse and leads campaigns on safety in academic environments. The Professor case shocked the Austrian education system and led to changes in background check protocols for teachers. Hey guys, the stories of serial killer encounters are still pretty chilling, aren't they? If you're enjoying these scary and real stories, take a quick break, subscribe to the channel, and leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and motivates me to keep bringing you more chilling content. Now let's get back to the next stories. There's still a lot of horror ahead. 4. The night driver, Sean O'Connor, had been driving the late-night taxi for 15 years, familiar with the streets of Dublin and the types of passengers who needed transport after midnight. The 48-year-old Irishman had seen it all: drunk executives, nurses coming off shifts, young people returning from parties, but it was in January that he noticed a peculiar passenger. "Downtown, please," the man said politely, getting into the taxi at 2:30 a.m. He looked to be in his 40s, well-dressed, and always polite. He introduced himself as Michael Walsh, claiming to work night security. Michael became a regular passenger, catching a taxi at the same corner 3 times a week. He paid well and talked politely. But Sean noticed something strange. Michael always asked to take a ride before going to his final destination, just to relax after work, Michael explained when Sean questioned the indirect routes. During these walks, Michael would watch closely for lone pedestrians, especially young women walking alone. He would make casual comments: "It's dangerous for a young woman to be walking alone at this hour," or "There should be more patrols in this area." Sean initially thought Michael was simply concerned about public safety, but he began to notice disturbing patterns. Michael would often ask to stop at specific locations, claiming to quickly check something out, often where there were women alone. "Can you wait 5 minutes?" Michael asked, getting out of the taxi near bus stops or subway stations where young people waited for transportation. Sean watched Michael approach these women, seemingly offering help or directions. He always returned to the taxi after a few minutes, looking satisfied. "Just helping lost tourists," he explained when Sean asked. But Sean became suspicious when he noticed Michael carrying a small camera, discreetly photographing the women he was talking to. "What are the pictures for?" Sean asked directly. "Safety documentation," Michael replied vaguely. "Reports for my supervisor." Sean's suspicions were heightened when he began hearing reports of young women disappearing in Dublin city centre. 3 cases in the past 2 months, all last seen near places where Michael had stopped to check on something. Sean decided to investigate discreetly. He began writing down the exact locations where Michael stopped, the times, and descriptions of the women he talked to. "You've been very observant lately, Sean," Michael commented during a ride, noticing the cabbie taking notes. "Just tax filings," Sean lied. But Michael had noticed the surveillance. During the next race, his behavior changed. He became more direct, less conversational, and Sean noticed that he was constantly checking his mirrors. "Sean," Michael said, calmly during a stop, "you've been asking a lot of questions lately." "Just professional curiosity," Sean replied, feeling tension rising. "Curiosity can be dangerous," Michael said, his voice losing its usual cordiality. "Especially for taxi drivers who work alone at night." Sean realized he was in danger. Michael knew his routine, knew where he lived, information from his taxi driver's license, and now saw him as a threat. The next night, Michael got into the taxi with a different demeanor, more tense, less friendly. He asked to go to an address. in an isolated industrial area. Change of plans, Michael said when they reached the deserted location. We need to talk about your curiosity. Michael revealed a knife, calmly explaining that Sean had discovered too much. He confessed to being responsible for the disappearances, using taxis to identify and follow potential victims. You taxi drivers are perfect, he said. You know the city, you work alone, no one questions where you go. Michael explained his methodology. He used different taxis to map the movements of vulnerable women, then returned later to attack when they were most isolated. You helped me without knowing it, Michael said. Your taxi took me to 7 different victims. As Michael prepared his attack, Sean remembered the panic button that all licensed taxis had. He discreetly activated the alarm connected to the taxi station. Very clever, Michael said, noticing the movement. But there's no time for rescue to arrive. Sean used his experience on the streets of Dublin to his advantage. He knew every alley, every shortcut. When Michael was distracted, Sean accelerated sharply, driving toward the nearest police station. Michael tried to force the steering wheel, but Sean managed to maintain control until they reached the police station, where officers on duty intervened. The investigation revealed that Michael Walsh was in fact David Murphy, a serial killer wanted in 3 countries. He had used taxis in Dublin, London, and Manchester to identify victims. He had been operating for 5 years, Detective Inspector Kelly explained. He used different taxi drivers as unwitting observers, mapping the movements of potential victims. 7 bodies were found in locations related to where Michael had stopped to check. All were young women traveling alone at night. For Sean O'Connor, the experience fundamentally changed his perception of passengers. He now participates in training programs for taxi drivers on identifying suspicious behavior. The night driver case led to changes in safety protocols for Irish taxis and monitoring systems for frequent passengers. And for night taxi drivers, be warned, watch out for passengers who make unusual requests or show excessive interest in other pedestrians. Not all polite passengers are simply going from one place to another. Some are using your service to hunt. The volunteer Rachel. Thompson has worked as a social worker at Hope Haven Shelter for 5 years, dedicating her career to helping women who are victims of domestic violence. The institution in central Manchester housed up to 30 women and children, offering safe haven and psychological support. It was in November that David Mitchell volunteered. The well-dressed, articulate 38-year-old claimed to be a retired psychologist. Interested in giving back to the community, his credentials seemed legitimate, and the shelter was always in need of help. I have experience with trauma, David explained during the interview. I want to use my knowledge to help these brave women. Initially, Rachel was impressed by David's dedication. He arrived on time, volunteered for extra activities, and seemed genuinely interested in the well-being of the residents. But after a few weeks, Rachel noticed disturbing behavior. David asked overly specific questions about the women's personal histories, always wanting details about their abusers, families, and financial situations. Where does your family live? He would ask during group sessions. Do you have contact with friends from before? Does anyone know where you are now? David always wants to know if we have outside support, said Sarah, a 24-year-old resident who had fled an abusive relationship. You ask if our family would look for us if we disappeared. Rachel began to observe David more closely. She noticed that he often volunteered for night shifts when there was less supervision. During these times, he spent an inordinate amount of time talking one-on-one with more vulnerable residents. He offered to take me to the hospital yesterday, said Maria, a 29-year-old Spanish refugee. He said he knew doctors who could help me without documentation. Rachel checked the records. David had often offered to accompany women to outside appointments, claiming to ensure their safety. More alarmingly, 3 residents had voluntarily left after accepting outside help from David. "Where are Jennifer, Lisa, and Amanda?" Rachel asked the supervisor. "They said they found better accommodation," the supervisor replied. "David helped them establish themselves independently." Rachel tried to contact all 3 women, but their phones were disconnected. None of them had left a contact address, which violated shelter protocol. Deciding to investigate, Rachel researched David online. She discovered inconsistencies in his credentials. The university where he claimed to have studied had no record of him, and the clinic where he supposedly worked had closed 5 years ago. "Who are you really?" Rachel confronted during a private meeting. David remained calm. "Just someone trying to help. Why the questions?" "Because 3 women disappeared after accepting your help." David smiled coldly. "They found better opportunities. Isn't that what we want for everyone?" Rachel realized that David was manipulating the situation, using the shelter's empowering language to justify suspicious actions. That night, Rachel remained hidden in the shelter after hours. She watched David access confidential files on residents, photographing documents with his cell phone. "Gathering information," she muttered, "documenting everything." David also discreetly installed a listening device in the therapy room where women shared intimate details about traumas and fears. Rachel contacted the police, but discovered the frustration of investigating crimes without clearly identified victims. "Adult women can leave voluntarily," the officer explained. Determined to protect the current residents, Rachel publicly confronted David during a staff meeting. "David is not who he claims to be," she announced. "His credentials are false, and 3 women have disappeared after accepting his help." David tried to discredit Rachel, claiming she was paranoid and undermining the important work of the shelter. But other staff members began reporting similar observations. David often asked about specific vulnerabilities, offered help that isolated women from institutional support, and seemed to know details about their lives that he had not legitimately obtained. The subsequent police investigation revealed that David Mitchell was in fact Robert Hayes, a predator with a history of infiltrating charitable organizations. He had been operating for 7 years, Detective Inspector Williams explained. He would infiltrate shelters, clinics, support groups, anywhere he could find vulnerable women. Robert used the information he gathered for blackmail and coercion. The 3 missing women were found in semi-captive conditions, forced to work in exploitative schemes. He convinced them they had no other options, Williams continued. He used knowledge of their trauma to manipulate them psychologically. The search of Robert's home revealed files on hundreds of women from different charities, including photographs, personal information, and detailed psychological analyses. For Rachel Thompson, the experience reinforced the importance of rigorous screening of volunteers. She now leads training on identifying predators in aid settings. The volunteer case shocked the British charity sector and led to changes in background check protocols for organizations serving vulnerable populations. And for professionals who work with victims, be warned. Not every dedicated volunteer has altruistic motivations. Some predators specifically infiltrate aid organizations, knowing that they will find victims who are already traumatized and isolated, perfect for further manipulation. 6. The Angel of Death James Mackenzie had been working as a nurse on the intensive care ward at the Royal Edinburgh Hospital for 12 years. At 34, he was respected by staff and known for his dedication to patients. It was during a night shift in September that he began to notice disturbing patterns involving Dr. Andrew Morrison. Dr. Morrison, a 41-year-old cardiologist, had transferred from Glasgow 6 months earlier. Charismatic and competent, he quickly gained the respect of the medical team. But James noticed something strange. Patients under Morrison's care had an inexplicably high mortality rate. Dr. Morrison's third patient this week, James murmured to his fellow nurse Sarah after yet another sudden death. They were all recovering. Well, Sarah nodded. Mr. Patterson was talking yesterday afternoon. This morning, unexplained cardiac arrest. James began quietly documenting. Within 2 months, 8 of Morrison's patients had died unexpectedly, all during night shifts, when there was less medical supervision. Maybe it's a coincidence, Sarah suggested. Dr. Morrison sees more serious cases, but James checked the records. Morrison wasn't just treating serious cases. Many of his patients who died were in stable recovery. During a particularly busy night, James watched Morrison administer medication to Margaret Campbell, a 73-year-old woman who was undergoing routine surgery. The woman was doing well, having been chatting with her family earlier. "What medication was that?" James asked. "Prescription painkiller," Morrison replied calmly. She complained of pain, but James had been with Margaret minutes earlier. She had not mentioned any pain. 2 hours later, Margaret suffered fatal cardiac arrest. James decided to investigate further. Accessing medical records, he discovered that Morrison was always present during nocturnal deaths, always claiming to have administered emergency medication shortly beforehand. Very convenient, James thought, noticing the pattern. Most disturbingly, Morrison often volunteered for night shifts, especially when there were elderly or vulnerable patients being admitted. James shared his suspicions with Dr. Helen Fraser, the medical supervisor. "Are you suggesting that Dr. Morrison is killing patients?" she asked incredulously. "I'm suggesting there's a worrying statistical pattern," James replied carefully. Dr. Fraser promised to investigate, but James noticed that Morrison had been discreetly informed of the suspicions. The following evening, Morrison confronted him. "I hear you have concerns about my work, James," Morrison said calmly. "Just statistical observations," James replied. "Statistics can be misleading," Morrison said, his voice carrying subtle menace, "especially when interpreted by people without proper medical training." James realized he was in danger. Morrison knew he was being watched and would not hesitate to silence witnesses. Determined to get concrete evidence, James discreetly installed a camera on his badge while on night shift. What he captured confirmed his worst fears. Morrison administered lethal overdoses of prescription drugs to vulnerable patients, often during times when other professionals were busy. "Mr. Williams need not suffer any longer," Morrison muttered to himself as he injected a fatal dose of morphine into a patient who was recovering well. James had evidence, but he knew that confronting Morrison directly would be dangerous. Instead, he contacted the police and medical authorities simultaneously. The ensuing investigation revealed that Dr. Andrew Morrison had killed at least 15 patients in 6 months. Toxicological analyses of exhumed bodies confirmed intentional overdoses. "He chose victims who would not be questioned," explained Detective Inspector Campbell. "Elderly people, terminally ill people, people with no immediate family." Morrison confessed during questioning, claiming he was relieving unnecessary suffering. But evidence showed many victims were recovering and not in significant pain. It was about control, the forensic psychologist explained. He liked to decide who lived and who died. The investigation has expanded to include previous hospitals where Morrison had worked. In Glasgow, another 12 suspicious deaths have been identified. In Aberdeen, 8 more cases have been identified. "He had been operating for at least 5 years, the detective continued. "I always changed hospitals when suspicions began to arise." Morrison had developed sophisticated methods to avoid detection. He used drugs that simulated natural deaths, chose victims whose deaths would not be questioned, and maintained the appearance of a dedicated physician. For James Mackenzie, the experience fundamentally changed his trust in the medical system. He now leads training on identifying suspicious behavior in hospital settings. The Angel of Death case shocked the Scottish health system, and led to changes in monitoring protocols for controlled drugs and doctor-based mortality rates. And for healthcare professionals, here's a warning. Question anomalous statistical patterns, and remember that not every dedicated doctor is genuinely interested in saving lives. Some use their position of trust to satisfy much darker impulses, turning hospitals into hunting grounds where vulnerable victims become easy targets. The support group, Clara Evans, still felt the scars of the attack that nearly cost her life 2 years ago. The 31-year-old survivor, a retired trauma nurse, found refuge in the violence therapy group at the Camden Community Center. The circle of 8 people met every Tuesday, sharing their pain and seeking collective healing. It was in March that David Morgan joined the group. An ordinary-looking 38-year-old man, he claimed to have survived a violent assault in Birmingham. His story seemed authentic, but Clara noticed something disturbing. David asked too many specific questions about other people's traumas. How exactly did you react when you realized you were being followed? He asked Sarah, a young woman who had escaped kidnapping. What thoughts went through your head in the first few seconds? David always wants very specific details, Emma. Another participant whispered to Clara after one session. He asks about our fears, where we live, if we have family support. Clara began to observe David more closely. He took mental notes during traumatic accounts, seeming to memorize each person's specific vulnerabilities. Most alarmingly, he often offered additional support outside of sessions. I can help you with self-defense exercises, he offered, to Lisa, who had reported panic in confined spaces. I know specific techniques for your type of trauma. Clara researched David online. She found no consistent records, no mention of the alleged Birmingham attack, no job vacancy, unclear residential history. Something doesn't add up, Clara muttered, checking social media. David had recently moved to London, but his previous posts had been sparse and generic. During one particularly intense session, David asked questions that chilled Clara's blood. Have you ever considered that your abusers might still be watching you, studying your routines, waiting for the right moment? The question caused visible panic in the group, but David seemed pleased with the reactions, as if he were collecting data. Clara decided to investigate discreetly. She contacted Birmingham police about David's alleged attack. We have no record of any David Morgan victims of assault in the last 5 years, the officer informed her. Most alarmingly, Clara discovered that 3 women from support groups in Birmingham had disappeared in the previous year, all after reporting significant improvements in their conditions. He's not a victim, Clara realized. He's a predator. In the next session, Clara observed David with a new perspective. He showed no real signs of trauma, no emotional triggers, no genuine reactions to painful stories. Instead, he coolly analyzed each vulnerability revealed. David, Clara confronted. After the session, can I talk to you? Of course, Clara. I've always admired your strength. I looked into his attack in Birmingham. There's no record. David remained calm. Not all crimes are reported properly. You know how the system fails. Victims, but Clara saw a coldness in his eyes that confirmed her suspicions. That night, Clara contacted Dr. Patricia Wells, the psychologist who coordinated the group. I have serious concerns about David Morgan. Clara, I understand that trauma can cause paranoia, but it's not paranoia. He's not who he claims to be. Dr. Wells promised to investigate, but Clara noticed that David had been discreetly informed of her suspicions. In the next session, David changed tactics. Clara has been very tense lately, he told the group. Sometimes trauma can cause excessive distrust. He was trying to isolate her, using psychological techniques against her. Determined to protect the group, Clara discreetly set up a recorder during the session. What she captured confirmed her worst fears. After everyone had left, David remained, photographing personal information accidentally left by participants. Clara took evidence to the police. The investigation revealed that David Morgan was actually Marcus Webb, a serial killer wanted in 3 counties. He had been infiltrating support groups for 5 years, Detective Inspector Thompson explained. He used the information he gathered to identify and target vulnerable victims. Marcus had developed a sophisticated methodology. He studied specific traumas, identified social isolation, then used psychological knowledge to manipulate victims when they were most vulnerable. 9 women were found dead on properties linked to Marcus. All had been members of support groups he had infiltrated. For Clara Evans, the experience reinforced her determination to help other survivors. She now leads safety workshops for support groups. The infiltrator case shocked British support communities and led to strict vetting protocols for new entrants. And for survivors seeking support, be warned, not every support group member is truly seeking healing. Some predators specifically infiltrate these spaces, knowing that they will find victims who are already traumatized and psychologically vulnerable. And so we come to the end of our 7 horror stories involving encounters with real serial killers. So which one scared you the most? The most disturbing thing is knowing that all of these situations actually happened to real people, right? Tell us in the comments which one was your favorite. If you enjoyed this dive into the terrifying world of encounters with human predators, don't forget to leave a like. This really helps the channel grow and encourages me to bring you more spine-chilling stories. And if you haven't subscribed yet, take advantage of it now to subscribe and activate the bell.